Well, good morning, boys and goyim. This is Vince Bird again, coming to you from the 11th Hour Remnant Messenger. My message today is going to be talking about Yahweh, our awesome God. Now, in today's world, we use the phrase awesome over and over again to describe events and various individuals who seem to excel at what they do. Musicians, even a song, athletics, basketball players, for example, football players, they performed an awesome feat. Well, there is only one awesome that qualifies as awesome in the entire universe, and that is Yahweh, Father, our God. Now, I'm going to give you examples of Yahweh God's awesomeness, and today I'm going to start with the moon of all things, and then I'm going to have some fun with you today, and give you some cosmic events that you may or may not know about, and postulate other things as we move on. Okay, we're going to talk about the moon. This is our moon. Our satellite travels around the Earth. Well, the astronomers and the physicists and everyone has come to believe that it goes around the Earth once every 27 days or so. And that's, of course, assuming that the Earth does rotate. Now, I know that's a pretty profound statement, but I'm going to talk to you a little about that. Now, if the moon does go around the Earth twice a day, instead of every 27 days, that would account for the 4 tidal changes in the oceans, and then also prove once again that the Earth doesn't rotate. Now, I know I've been called crazy in the past, and sometimes maybe rightfully so, but by the time you're finished with me today, you might have a different perspective on how things work in the universe. Here we are looking at the moon's phases as it goes around the Earth. Okay, now we have something out there in the cosmos, something called ether, or the ethereal. Now, various and sundry individuals over time, scientists, the ancients, they believed that spirit world lives in the ethereal or ether, and that certain cosmic or quantum physical items operate in the ether or ethereal. And there's a large body of belief in the scientific community even today that cannot explain various events that make up our world and even make up the universe. For example, no one can explain fully how gravity works or what it is. Now, I happen to believe that instead of gravity, we have something called electromagnetic force or electromotive force. Now, these are the things that are holding the universe together like a glue, and not so much gravity, which cannot be explained. And while we're talking about unexplainable phenomena, science has a very difficult time explaining how radio waves move about and through various and sundry objects at different frequencies. You can look those up for yourself. That's not the topic of my discussion today. My topic today is to talk about our awesome God, Yahweh, and how he has immutable laws of the universe, and that these immutable laws have been set in place from time immemorial, and that science, and that would include physics, chemistry, and mathematics, and all the other higher levels of intelligent learning that we have come to know, are only trying to identify and quantify what God has already set into place. So the designs and the inventions and the discoveries and everything that we have done as a human race is only like I said, quantifying what Yahweh God has done. And why did I go off? I'm going to do this again. Why are we off? Why are we off? Why are we off? We're supposed to be on. I don't get it. Okay, we're going to keep this going. Hold on just a second. Bear with me, please. Okay, am I cooking here? Okay, I'm cooking. Yes, I'm cooking. Okay, so we have this thing called quantum science and physics and chemistry. And again, I'll say that it's only trying to quantify what God has already done. Now, it is my belief, because if you look at the human anatomy as an example, you'll see that we have a heart that beats several 100,000 times a day and pumps, wow, how many quarts through our body each and every hour. It's an amazing feat. Now, why is this heart able to beat? Think about that. Yeah, we are a life force, but this heart and the heart of every creature on this planet allows us to exist by providing the blood supply, which does any number of things, converting oxygen and using that oxygen to energize our cells, to provide nourishment in many instances. And as it moves from our arteries through back to our veins and back to our lungs, we discharge something called carbon dioxide, which expels much of the waste of our blood that we haven't used. Okay, so that's a pretty interesting phenomenon. But the heart beats each and every day. That's an electrical impulse. It is my belief that through the ether or ethereal, that God in his awesome power provides every heartbeat for every creature on the planet. There is no other explanation for it. Yes, we have to eat food, and we have photosynthesis, and we have any number of things that provide the life force that lives within us that allows all this to happen. But the idea and notion that this magnificent heart that we walk around with in our chest beats independently forever and ever until it either gets tired or until Yahweh removes his hand from it. It is my belief that that's where every heartbeat comes from on every living creature on the planet. Crazy? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, let's get back to the moon for a minute. I like the moon thing because there's a lot to be said about the moon. Okay? I'm going to get into more of it, but I'm going to tell you right now, it is my belief that we never went to the moon and landed. We went to the moon, all right. We probably circled it and came back on the Apollo programs, and we get the push off from the Titan and Atlas missiles from the early days. But here's an interesting thing about the moon. I'm going to show it to you one more time. Okay. No person on this planet, for as long as history has recorded it, has ever seen any more of the moon than this. I want you to think about that. This is the face of the moon. This is what we see either when a full moon or even what they call the new moon, which is totally dark but can be seen through very powerful microscopes, and any quarter thereof as depicted here. Now, as the moon goes around the Earth, and it does, there's no question about that, it revolves once every 27 days if the Earth does rotate, and once or 4 times a day when it doesn't. Now, that phenomenon is pretty profound. Now, it is my belief that as a result of that phenomenon, that it faces us each and every day, and no one on this planet, as far back as history records, has ever seen more of the moon than a couple of degrees either side, has never seen the backside of the moon. Okay? That's a phenomenon that could only have the hand of God in it. There's no other, maybe one other system in the solar system that might do that, but none of the other moons do it on any of the other planets. Okay, it does on the Earth. Now, the moon was placed there by God. He tells us why it was there, for any number of reasons, and I'll get into that. But first, I want to get back to that moon landing. I know I'm jumping around here, and I tend to do that, but I get pretty excited about what I'm talking about, and I want you to know. Okay, I'm going to tell you why we didn't get on the moon and land on it. It's not because of the shadows. That has been an argument of the astronauts on the moon and how the shadows and the reflections occurred. It's not because of the delay in the communication and anomalies, which were almost non-existent. They, at the moon landing, the astronauts and Houston were talking to one another almost like they were next door to one another. The moon is 240,000 miles away. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. Ergo, radio waves travel very close to that. The delay could be argued that there was not enough delay to justify that distance. It's not because of the astronauts, Armstrong and the others, bouncing around on the moon. Theoretically, the moon has 1/6 the gravity of the Earth. They'd be bouncing a lot further and a lot higher. Not because we cannot see the rover or the flag from the Hubble microscope or any other entity we have on Earth. That has never been picture of the rover, land rover, and the flag planted on the moon has never been taken from anywhere but up next to it. I find that interesting. It seems that Hubble can look out into the vast expanses of light years away, and we're getting information and data about planets that are out there and whether they can have life or not. And yet, and even using radio waves, infrared, and any other means that the scientific community has, yet they cannot show us the Hubble or Land Rover with all the finest telescopes in the world, and the Hubble is out there so that there wouldn't be any distraction from our atmosphere. Anyway, and not because maybe we didn't even go at all, or not because of the floating moon dust as the astronauts bounced around. I'm going to tell you why we didn't go. We never had the technology to go. Oh, we had the technology to go to the moon, and what very few people know on this Earth, especially in America, because we're so dumbed down by our Marxist Gramsci educational system, that in the early days when we were firing rockets to see if we would, what it would take to hit the moon, or doing hard landings and to take close-up pictures before we went to the moon, turns out the Russians hit the moon with the rockets long before we did. Our rockets never made it. Now here's how that system works. And I know from whence I speak. I have some knowledge of ICBM rocketry and anti-missile technology, and we have something that's called escape velocity, and we have something called throw weight. Now, throw weight is the weight that it takes that a rocket would take to move it some distance, a predetermined distance usually. So many people think that when you send a rocket to the moon, or you send a rocket into space, or you send a rocket to Mars, that you're burning fuel the entire time. You're not. The escape velocity requires about 25,000 miles an hour from our rocket system. Okay, I don't care whether you're going about 15,000 to 25,000. I don't care whether you're just putting an Endeavour into orbit, or you're sending someone to the moon. In order to escape Earth's electromagnetic or gravitational field or force, it takes that much escape velocity to remove ourselves from the Earth's gravitational pull. Now, when you're going into orbit, when you reach that escape velocity, you then turn and you begin to orbit around the Earth at somewhere between 25 and 100 miles above the Earth. Okay, now that revolution around the Earth is what keeps the Endeavour and the Russian space station somewhat in its altitude above the Earth, and the centrifugal force of that speed around the Earth is what keeps it in that orbit pretty much. Now, the Earth is 25,000 miles around. The orbiters tend to go around the Earth in about an hour and a half. So that puts them going somewhere around, what are we talking about? 15,000 miles an hour or so. Okay. Now, when you go to the moon, you have to land on the moon, and we had two vehicles that went to the moon. One was the vehicle that had the escape velocity to get to the moon, and you only burn for so long. You get enough the throw weight is such, you burn. You see these big rockets on either side of the Endeavour. That's something we see every time there's a launch. Those are holding fuel, and each one holds a different chemical, and those chemicals combine at the bottom of the nozzle, and they ignite, and that then is many tens of thousands minute explosions per second, which fires those rockets up with the Endeavour lander on it. And so once it breaks free of the atmosphere, you tend to push that rocket, or they relieve themselves of the rocket. You push the vessel that's going to make that journey to the moon to the point where the rockets drop off. There's nothing there, but whatever fuel is left in that vehicle that's on its way to the moon. And they fire it at short bursts as they go along the way, because the inertia of leaving the Earth's atmosphere and heading towards that direction, and the moon doesn't pull it, because whether the Earth rotates or not, or whether the moon revolves around the Earth in 27 days or 4 times a day, they say the moon's electromagnetic force, or gravity, if you will pull that lander, or that rover, or that orbiter to the moon. Not likely. There's not enough pull there to do it at 1/6 the pull of the Earth, of the gravity of the Earth, or electromagnetic force of the Earth. But anyway, we probably went to the moon. We went around the moon and we come back. But the idea and notion that we could drop a lander on the moon, right, and exit that, set up television cameras, stay on the moon for we were there for 3 or 4 days. I don't remember exactly. And then fire that rocket up and fire that lander up and rendezvous with a vessel going around the orbiter, going around the moon, and hooking up with that perfectly and coming back to Earth was an impossible feat at the time. Now, you remember this happened in the 60s and early 70s. Okay? At that time, or shortly after the first so-called walk on the moon, I was working on Kwajalein Island under government contract. And on that contract, it was for the United States Army. I was working for Global Associates, and we were to support the activities of the scientists and engineers that work for the likes of Raytheon, Westinghouse, RCA, and other companies, major corporations, to develop the Nike X missile. Now, the Nike X missile was an anti-missile. It was designed, and the theory was to destroy a nuclear warhead on an ICBM that would have been fired from a foreign country, and at that time that would have been most likely Russia. Well, Kwajalein is 8,000 miles downrange from Vandenberg Air Force Base in Central California, along the coast, and in Lompoc, outside of Lompoc. So about once a month, Vandenberg would fire an ICBM downrange towards Kwajalein. Now, that rocket would go up. It had a fake nuclear warhead, and it would throw that rocket to an altitude of about 8,000 feet. I'm sorry. It's 8,000 miles. It would throw that warhead up to an altitude of about 100,000 feet, just above the atmosphere. And when that burn was done, the rocket and missile would free float through the air 8,000 miles downrange. Now, I'm going to tell you the folly of nuclear war and the idea and notion that you would have early warning or a an ability to evacuate a city or even your own home. We would get the countdown on Kwajalein as Vandenberg did the countdown to fire that ICBM downrange. And guess what happened? In less than 18 minutes, that ICBM would be entering the atmosphere above Kwajalein. And as it did enter the atmosphere, somewhere just below 100,000 feet, it would begin to break up. Now, these shots usually occurred at night, so that we could see these, like a meteor, these pieces breaking off and being lit up by the friction of the metal in the atmosphere. And the idea was for the Nike X to be fired before the ICBM warhead got below, and it was a fake warhead, got below something like 80,000 feet, so that we could blow it up where it wouldn't do nearly as much damage on the Earth, but it would certainly preserve and protect our population and the target city. Well, in the beginning, we weren't hitting that warhead very often because there was so much debris breaking apart up there. The Nike X couldn't tell the warhead from major large pieces of the ICBM that were breaking up. Anyway, that was my point, how rocketry works. Now, because we never had the technology or the fuel to land, take off later, and rendezvous